Hey guys, so welcome to another day. What is it, the 20th of January? So yeah, so week 3 in already. So interesting stuff happening now. I mean, it's really started to, I guess, not bad things, but not good things in terms of nothing much is really happening in terms of the market booming or anything like that. I think people are now starting to get worried the stamp duty is stopping, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Section 21 abolishment looming, which means you won't be able to get back your property unless you're going to take certain measures. But yeah, we're going to talk about Brexit in particular, but more about the trade deals now. So rather than talking about Brexit, the actual Brexit, it's more about what do we do now? What's the map from here? And really, it is about trade deals right now. The more trade deals we can negotiate, the better the outcome will be, of this whole thing. But there's obviously a lot of the pain being felt now because there's a lot of change, things like that. We'll also look at what's the possibility of Canada, New Zealand and Australia and the UK joining into one massive, effectively trading bloc, okay? Which I think would make them the second largest trading bloc outside the EU if they did that. So that's quite an interesting thing. Not sure it's going to happen, but they're all very aligned. But anyway, we'll talk more about that. US and UK, what's going to happen with that trade deal. And then we'll look at council licensing because it's one of the most frustrating things for me. But anyway, we'll get into that. And then sex for rent. So it sounds like some landlords are having some fun at the, I won't say the expense of the, anyway, we'll have a look at that as a bit of fun. But yeah, guys, so let's get into it. Before we start, if you've got any questions, pump them into the comments and I'll be happy to answer them as we go through. And then basically, make sure you subscribe and like the video. Really help us out and really appreciate you watching. So look, guys, welcome and let's get started. So Section 21. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because one of the things I find interesting with this whole Section 21 thing is that basically what they're saying is Section 21 is the no fault. So basically you can say, I want you out of my house. And, it used to be 2 months. Now it's 6 months. So they've extended that, but now they're talking about abolishing it, which means effectively, if you want your property back or you want somebody out, just for, you woke up one morning and said, I want you out, you won't be able to get them back. Okay, so you'll have to go through one of the other sections. In other words, the tenant will either have to choose to leave or do something wrong in order for you to get rid of them. So this is going to be one of the issues going forwards is if you think about it, one of the things that they said was we're going to abolish this, but we're going to strengthen the landlord's rights. Okay. Now, on the face of it, it's really not a big thing for most landlords. Most of the landlords we have, they're happy to have the place rented. Yeah. So it's not actually a real problem. And for the most part, we've not really seen any landlords abuse the Section 21. I know there's this big political thing about it. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference in terms of the tenure, in terms of how long people stay. The reality is if you do the wrong thing as a tenant, then you deserve to get chucked out and go find yourself somewhere else. Because at the end of the day, as a landlord, we have paid money and we have invested a lot of money into that to keep it, to maintain it, to buy it, to all that sort of stuff. Okay, and then if you're abusing that privilege, if you're not keeping your side of the contract, then you don't deserve to maintain that contract. Now obviously it's very emotive and there's, rent generation, all that get involved in it. But bottom line is for me is that, if the whole thing was Section 21 abolished, we're going to strengthen the landlord's rights to actually when something goes wrong. But, amazingly, we're not seeing that side of it. What we're seeing about is talking about this, the renter's rights, not the landlord's rights, there's plenty of landlords out there right now that aren't getting any rent just because the renters are saying, too bad, you can't chuck me out, you'll have to come after me. And then the court is going to be, take so long to get there for a start into court to get them out. And then secondly, even when you do get them out, to get them to pay the arrears is a whole nother kettle of fish, And that really is the challenge right now with the system. It's so swayed, and skewed to the wrong way. Do I think, look, I know a lot of people are worried about it. For the most part, look, if you will be able to sell the property. So you'll be able to give notice in order to sell the property. Yeah. So that's fine. But will you be able to, just wake up one morning and say, I want them out? No, you won't be able to. You won't have that choice. You'll have to go through one of the existing notices for antisocial, rent arrears, whatever. and that sort of thing. So, but that will be where things are at, basically. Yeah, so we'll see how that all ends up. So, house prices, almost 100K stamp duty, 100,000 sales will miss stamp duty deadline. So what will happen with house prices if that's the case? Are people buying because of that and therefore they're going to negotiate? Well, actually, Rightmove is already saying that house prices are actually coming down to beat the rush. Now, my concern is that, and they're saying, Rightmove have said that house prices fell 0.9%, almost 1%. But that was more. These are not actual, this is asking prices. This is not sales prices, okay? So you've got to be really careful about where you look, because the problem is if you deal in asking prices versus actual sold prices, and then you look at the mortgage prices and things like that, most of these news agencies, they'll work for this data, then they'll work with this data, and they'll work with this data, and they'll make it suit the headline they want, and that's what you're going to be used to. Do I think, look, I've thought, I predicted -3 for this year. I think things are going to come off. And the reality is the closer we get to March, the less likely, and in fact, it's unlikely now if you buy a property that you're going to actually get it in before the stamp duty, okay? Unless you get a pretty good fair wind, but even mortgage companies, they're just not doing stuff that quickly, So unless it's a cash purchase, then okay, you probably got time. But there is a lot of sales, and what they're talking about is those 100,000 sales are likely to be in the pipeline. But there's about 600,000 sales that have taken, 609,000, I think they said, that have taken advantage of the stamp duty. So it's been quite effective from that perspective. We'll see what happens and whether prices drop off. I don't think it's going to be a dramatic year. I think really it's going to be a pretty much steady state. I don't think the government wants house prices to drop. I don't think they want people losing their jobs, which is going to cause potentially house prices to drop. I think a lot of these sort of factors are already in place where, there's the support mechanisms in place. So I don't see house prices do too much, in terms of upwards or downwards, all right, this year. And I think really with the coronavirus, it's going to take the rest of the year too. I heard EasyJet, had 250% increase in sales in bookings because everyone thinks that summers, will be back and we'll all be I'm not so sure. I think a lot of those flights may not happen, potentially cancelled. Who knows? We'll see. I guess it depends how the rollout with the vaccine goes and actually how, I guess the whole vaccine goes, the whole thing. But yeah. So let's move on to Brexit. Now, interesting, this is from December 21st. Okay? So this is before we did the deal. But interesting, Dutch MEP hints at Nexit amid brutal dressing down of micromoney. In other words, he said basically, sort out the fishing, otherwise Netherlands may be the next. But I thought it's interesting because one of the things we've been talking about for years, and even before anyone mentioned Brexit and all that, I was talking about how actually we may think that this EU is a solid organisation that's going to be there for hundreds of years. Actually, that's not the case in most of these trading blocks. They do dissolve. There's been over 200 of them that have come and gone, and a lot of them don't last very long at all. So, we may start to see that when people get, when they see the UK comes out and actually does okay, and and then starts doing deals with other countries, we may see that sort of take off, and things do well, which will be quite interesting. Brexit house prices, how the housing market's changed since Brexit. Look, it's interesting. There's a lot of these sort of things coming out about there's been significant changes in the market at Brexit. Actually, the market's been dead since 2016, realistically. We had the election where Boris got in and then things started to boom. We then had coronavirus drop it, but then it's come back. But actually, what we've found is that the places that have been getting the highest increases are the places that were dead for the 10 years before that. Yeah. So we're now starting to see some of those areas start to kick back, and that's needed. Austerity was the worst thing for house prices across the UK. It's only the major cities and where the major economics and fundamental areas that actually saw decent house price growth. Other areas saw prices drop back and they just haven't taken off and they haven't got up. Really it was a lost decade. It was fully a lost decade, if not more, because, from 2008 all the way to really 2020, that's a long time. That's, 12 years of nothing much happening at all. And that's unfortunately the reality of the housing market in the UK, you know. So hopefully now we're going to start to see the whole of the UK benefit. But again, it depends on what the government's spending and what areas benefit from that. And I don't think that's going to be everywhere. I think you will still go back to the major fundamentals areas. I know I'm banking most of my investment strategy on the best fundamentals, not just anywhere. You know, cheap is not in my vocabulary, sort of thing. So yeah. Interestingly though, with Brexit, one of the things we are seeing is that, you know, the companies and various companies are having to wake up to the reality of what's going on with Brexit. You know, the fact that if they are trading with the EU, how they're dealing that and how they're actually getting things exported, how they're getting things imported, and all the extra burden. And this is one of the things I think really the government needs a big kick in the ass. You know, yeah, I'm allowed to say that anyway. They need a big kick in the ass. You know, and Boris needs a big kick in the ass, because to have the 24th of December and then the 1st of January, literally pre-Christmas, to plan and prepare and know what's going on, you know, is just horrible, terrible, and really probably spoiled Christmas for a lot of people. So he may sit there and sing and dance that he got a deal, but you know what? Screw you, you asshole, you know, leaving it so long, because you just don't give a shit about the companies. You know, you made out that it was so easy, and then these last minute things don't work for big companies, and in fact don't work for little companies. You know, so really, you know, it wasn't a win on your place. I know politically they play it. I know I said that was how it was going to run out, and it did. But, you know, now a lot of companies are waking up to the added burden. And, you know, we're already getting this. Governments, I mean, and this is governments now, they're really starting to, you know, almost hammer the death nail in for government. Government needs to reinvent itself. It needs to work for the people, not against the people. And really, unfortunately, they're becoming self-serving, you know, and dinosaurs. They're not using the latest technology. They're not keeping up with things. They're doing stupid things all the time, you know, and last minute, no planning, you know, and they can say, well, there's, you know, plenty of time to play. You knew it was coming and all that. No, we didn't know it was coming. You know, you lacked all leadership. But anyway, so let's move on to sort of a bit more positive now. So trade deals, interestingly enough, now ignore the photo, that's from 2019, but one of the things that looking quite good is, you know, the Aussie, you know, UK trade deal. And I think actually that it'll definitely come off. I don't think there's any question of that. And one of the things I found interesting was it's in both people's benefit. It's in the UK and that, and hopefully we get a total free trade deal and the Aussies can go, you know, there and the British can come there, because we've done that for history. I mean, I literally, I mean, my grandfather was British, you know, my grandmother was Scottish. So I was able to come over on an ancestry visa and get my UK visa, a UK citizenship. But it is really a rite of passage almost as an Australian. And I think a lot of English or, you know, UK people do the same. They go back to Australia. So we want to keep that, you know. But one of the things that we have had a look at is, or there is a lot of talk about now, I'm not sure how serious it is right now or how quickly this will come, but, you know, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, you know, become Britain's new EU. You know, it'll be interesting to see what happens here. You know, 136 million people that would be. Very different than the EU. The EU is geographically together. But this would be much more, the difference is the EU is 26 languages and countries and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, you know, culturally, UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand are very, very similar. You know, we play the similar sports, although the Canadians have a bit more, you know, ice and snow and things like that than the Kiwis do as well. But, you know, very similar. And so actually that could work very well. And one of the things that's being poised at is to position as the, you know, rebuttal against China's, you know, dominance. We'll see, because obviously Australia made the mistake of letting Murdoch's papers and things like that dictate and say silly things about China. And of course now Australia's paying the price for that. And, you know, my mates in Oz are eating lobsters for Christmas because they're only $15, because all those lobsters were going to China and now they're not, which is quite interesting. You know, so that's the benefit, not benefit of, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, the other side of it is, you know, UK-US trade deal. You know, what could post-Brexit Britain hope to do? Look, I mean, I think the reality with this is it's going to be delayed. I mean, Biden has now an impeachment of Trump. He's got, the first 100 days. I don't think he's going to be interested in getting a deal done with the UK in the first 100 days. He's got to get the coronavirus under control. He's got to get some, tax rollbacks and things like this, all the internal policies. So I think the trade deal is just going to fall to the back. Now maybe they see it as a big political win to get back on, thing, and they will move forward with that. But I just don't see it. I think it's going to fall back. So I think, there will be trade deals coming, and that's good. The more we can do of that, the better it is. But as a property investor, this whole Brexit thing, I think really, you can almost put it to the side. And as a property investor, what you really need to be looking at now is what are the areas that are likely to grow, and what are the areas that are at least risks of price dropping, of people losing their jobs, of employers, falling over and companies falling over. Because I think this year we're going to see more of that interest rate. Now, next week we'll have the interest rates, the unemployment redundancy figures out. I think it's on the 26th of January. So we'll have a better idea of what's happened over Christmas. I don't think it's going to change much because of the furlough situation. But I think when that ends, it could be a double edge, because you've got the furlough ending at the same time that, or similar time as stamp duty ending. So you might see, actually, that's when things jump up, and that's when reality hits, in its first dose. But I don't think the reality is going to be as bad as people make out, or as a lot of people think. Okay, so for me, that's quite good news, guys. I haven't had any questions yet. I'm just actually, we got the. I hope the comments are not working. This restream that we're using isn't as reliable, I don't think, on the comments. Either that or nobody is. There's people. There's plenty of people watching. Yeah, let me just see on my phone and see. Yeah, don't know. Anyway, maybe nobody wants to speak to me today. But if you've got a question, tap it into the comments, and hopefully they'll come through. But yeah, cool. So, council licensing. Interesting. We've got these, council pushing licensing, and one of the problems we have really with this whole thing is that, it's just so hard with this, because you have people. Look, the big problem with me with the licensing is, in principle, it sounds good, raise the standard of housing. But the implementation is so horrific, okay? We have properties across the UK, and every single council that runs it has different criteria, has different things, has different requirements, has different names for things, has different, it's appalling from my perspective. And, yeah, okay. Yeah, so it looks like there's no comments coming through, but anyway. Yeah, so we'll try and get it fixed while I'm online. But yeah, look, my challenge is, it would have been a lot better for the government to go, oh, we're going to have council licensing. You can apply for it. Here's the application form. Here's what has to be done. Here's the standardized criteria. Instead, we're left doing this form there, that form there, having to do 6 months inspections, 3 months inspections, having to do criminal records checks, having to do, and it just changes everywhere. It makes it so bloody hard. But yet they've made it so draconian and so ridiculously, stupid how they've done the punishment. If you don't get a license, we have a building where on one side of the building you have to have it, and on the other side of the building you don't have to have it. It's just appalling. They literally drew a line down the map, and because the building is half, well, that does and that doesn't. Or one side of the street needs them, the other side of the street doesn't. It's just ridiculous how they've done that. And that's, the whole thing. But the other side, they're saying, the socially irresponsible bit, Arla is saying, and that's because basically right now landlords are getting hit from everything. They can't evict. There's rent arrears building up. There's all this sort of stuff. There's so much going on, and councils want to introduce more stuff. They live in another world. And, this is the problem with councils now. And as I said, with governments before, I just think they're outdated, and a lot of the things that they think they're doing just isn't working, and they need to rewrite what their actual use is, because I think very quickly a lot of their use, is going to be going out the door. And look, I've got nothing against local councils, but they need to really work towards, servicing the people there. And the way they're doing this licensing is just ridiculous, So yeah, so growing political anger over sex for rent landlords. Look, guys, this is, I mean, I have to laugh about this one because, basically landlords are saying and advertising on online platforms that they don't need to pay rent in lieu of sexual favours. Now, I'm not sure of the legal stance on that, or where that sits, but I think it's quite interesting, the whole thing, because, I mean, I don't know who's offering that, but if the politicians are involved, then that's pretty interesting. But then maybe it's a slow news day, but to have that come out, good on them. I mean, if they're going to do that, then I don't want to get involved in that, but certainly we won't be advertising that on our website. But anyway, good. Okay, so it looks like comments aren't coming through YouTube again. Okay, so anyway, so Hamansa has just said, so Hamansa has just said, in your opinion, do you think lending will become harder from a buy-to-let perspective? I actually don't, in fact. I think there was a massive increase in how hard things got and the detail I had to go into. I think now what we're going to see is that if anything, there'll be for probably this year, nothing will change. It's bloody hard now. How could it get harder? It can't, but I think a lot of, for instance, in Australia, they tightened it and then they tightened it too fast and then they've relaxed it. And I think generally what you see with the criteria is it tightens and then relaxes. But I think 2021, we're going to see what happens. If it all turns to pot, then potentially, they will tighten things up for everybody, not just buy-to-let. However, if it plods along like we're expecting it to, then I think it'll stay around about the same. But I think then potentially next year is when we'll start seeing the loosening. So I think once, we might see some changes with the financial markets because obviously Biden's in. He do some things that might, up or down the market in the US, which will affect the rest of the world. You might see coronavirus get under control quicker. There's so many unknowns from that perspective. But I think the bottom line is, irrespective, I think buy-to-let's not going to get harder than it is. It's already really as tight as I've ever seen it. But I think next year and 2022 is when I think we'll start seeing loosening because that will be companies now wanting to lend and they want to bring in more business. And that's when we'll start to see, if anything, the rise of property again. And I think that's, 2021 really is going to be a bit like 2020. It'll be, nothing special and nothing that, it's not like you're going to make huge amounts of money by sitting on your property, but I don't think you're also going to lose huge amounts of money. And I think it will depend on where you're at, because I think some areas will activate quicker and sooner than other areas. So, that's my take on that. And pretty much that's a standardized answer that I would say through any recession and any recovery. So we're seeing the recovery now, but the recovery is still on rocky ground because we just did an experiment last year and we continue to do the experiment this year, which was inject huge amounts of cash into the world economy. Now we're seeing what happens. So it worked for this year, got us through that. The question is what's going to happen this year. If we get through this year, then I think we're going to be on the road definitely to recovery, and it will be that V-shaped recovery. And then that becomes, I think that will become the model for recessions going forward into the future. So we'll start to see more of that, but then that will potentially lead to inflation. But the question is the inflation rate's so low right now, it's not expected to go too high. So I think that'll continue. But we'll see. It may all turn around and it may be a case of we put too much cash in and then that's going to cause inflation. I don't see deflation happening. I don't see stagflation happening at this stage. I think the only risk is really inflation, but probably not this year. Maybe starting next year, the year after, or it could just be kicked down. The can could be kicked down the road. We're in a low inflation, and we've seen in the rate of returns and things like that over time decreasing. Okay. So Amin says, do you think the stamp duty holiday will be extended? From my experience, has been a detriment to the market. It's caused artificial inflation, which is outstripping the stamp duty's maximum savings, 15K. So my take on this is, do I think it's going to be extended? I don't think it'll be extended carte blanche. Yeah, I think if it's going to be extended, then it will be a focused extension. In other words, it'll be these people get to take advantage of it for extended, but not these people. So maybe it's only if you're buying your home, but not buy to lets. It's only on if you're a resident, a local resident, but international buyers need to pay. And I think that's how this year will be. This year, I think the stimulus, last year was just get the money out there. Just throw it wherever you can, inject it wherever you can, as long as it's getting and keeping the economy flowing. Yeah. This year will be more about this industry gets that industry gets none. This industry has benefited hugely last year. It doesn't need more, so actually it won't get any. And I think that's what we're going to see with this happening. Do I think it was been detrimental to the market? Look, has it artificially risen prices? Yes, I think it has. I don't think that's up for debate. I think it has. Did it need to? Yeah, I think it did. And in fact, I'm happy that it has, because what it does, it created a sentiment in the market that took away that fear. And because it took away that fear, it's meant people have been able to trade and people have been able to, feel a bit more confident about themselves. Whereas if they hadn't have done it, then, rather than having this mini boom, things might have just ticked along and maybe dropped a little bit or it's done 0%. And, we'd be a bit, not sure. I think what it's done, it gave a lot of confidence in the market that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So it was a positive distraction. But I also realized that if you're trying to get on the ladder, and all of a sudden you're getting outbid, and first time buyer getting outbid and outbid and outbid, it's frustrating, So there is the element of that. But at the time, we just didn't know what was going to go on. So actually at the time, I think it was the right decision. And for me, should we extend it? No, I don't think we should. I think if you've got, maybe if you bought it or you had the reservation done before the 31st of December or whatever, then okay, fair enough. You get it extended for a further 2 months or something to get it through. But yeah, I don't think it'll be extended, is my take on that. So yeah. Any other questions, guys? Because otherwise, that's me done for today. So, I think the one thing with today, or the one thing with this week, is there's lots and lots of stuff going on with Brexit and the stories about Brexit. Property, actually, there's not a lot going on in property right now. Now, I say that, but actually there is a lot of stuff in the background around regulation and compliance and things like that. That's going to continue, Unfortunately, that pendulum is swinging the other way now, and I feel it's, but what we do need to do is we do need to address, and the government needs to address the issues with landlords not getting paid and not being able to get tenants out in a timely manner. They said they were going to strengthen that. They haven't done anything towards that. They're trialing a mediation platform. Well, agents are already doing that, so I don't really see an interesting. There was a survey done amongst the industry, and over 85% of people said it's going to make no difference whatsoever. So I think that's where the government's out of touch, and I think that's one of the reasons why the housing ministers, they come and they leave so quickly. I think we've had like 6 or 7 of them in the last 5 years. It's just ridiculous. You almost don't bother learning their names because it's like a revolving door. They're in and they're out. They're in and they're out. Which is unfortunate. But yeah. But anyway, guys, if you're interested too, on the 26th of January, I've got our webinar. So you can go to gladfish.com/webinars. Basically, we're looking at predictions for this year and really the strategy in the areas that I think. Okay, we've got Ryan, Ritz, myself, and Dan. So the 4 of us on. We're each going to be giving our own thoughts and our own, take on the whole thing. So that's 26th. It's at 5 p.m. on the 26th of January. So go to webinars and book in for that. And it'll be a interactive thing, so you'll be able to ask questions and that sort of stuff as well. But yeah, guys. All right. Well, thank you very much. But don't forget to, subscribe, like, and if you've got any questions throughout, you can send an email to webinars@gladfish.com. That'll come to me, and then I'll be able to record a video and put it out on social media. So I'm getting back into this. So we've just implemented our new software with EasyTrack. So that's now in, and we're working, and the go live date officially is February 1st. So from then I'll be doing a lot more video because I can focus back on that and not so much the software. But yeah, guys, stay safe, and yeah, I guess hopefully the lockdown is giving you an opportunity to spend some time with family and not, costing too much or not to your mental health, I mean. But yeah, have a great week, and we'll see you next week. All right, guys. See you later. Bye.